I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to the first episode of the Caropop Cast. I'm so glad you're here as we launch this podcast devoted to conversations with musicians, filmmakers, actors, chefs, and other creative people. In my years as a journalist for the Chicago Tribune and other outlets, I've loved talking about the creative process with many kinds of artists. I've done this for stories, I've done it on radio, and I've done it on stage, including in my own live series, Talking in Space, which ran at a Chicago area club until the pandemic put it on hold. Now such conversations will be taking place here on the Caropopcast and the Caropop website. I'm very excited about it, especially given that my first guest is one of my favorite performers and songwriters, Richard Thompson. I can't think of another musician who has produced such a consistently excellent body of work over such a long time. He was writing great songs and playing jaw-droppingly expressive guitar as a founding member of the British folk band Fairport Convention in 1967, and more than 50 years later, he's still creating great music, including his 2018 album 13 Rivers and a couple of COVID-era EPs that he has released on digital formats. Richard Thompson has a new memoir out, Beeswing, named after one of his songs that the first time you hear it, you think it must have existed forever. Richard Thompson has more than a few of those. May I just note that two of his most beloved songs, 1952 Vincent Black Lightning and Beeswing, were released in the 1990s, his fourth decade of producing music? How many other artists and songwriters are still peaking in their fourth decade? His 1999 album, Mock Tutor, may be his best solo album. And as I mentioned, 13 Rivers, released a mere 3 years ago when Richard Thompson was 69 years old, is awfully strong as well. And his tour for that album with his trio was tremendous. That storm did come. But back to Beeswing, the book. It technically covers 1967 to 1975, the year in which he paused his career when he'd been recording and performing music with his then-wife, Linda Thompson. The memoir does extend a bit after that into their landmark 1982 album, Shoot Out the Lights, the dissolution of their marriage, and the continuation of his career as a solo artist. But the bulk of it concentrates on his years with Fairport Convention and afterward as he figures out how he wants to live as an artist and as a human being on this planet. He tells great stories in the book, and he does so in our conversation as well. How could Fairport Convention have fired such a one-of-a-kind singer-songwriter as Sandy Denny? On what Badfinger song did he play as a session musician? How close did he come to joining the Eagles? Yes, those Eagles. If you're a Richard Thompson fan, this conversation will be a treat, and if you're not a Richard Thompson fan, you will be. Quick note. For this first Caropopcast episode, we had some technical issues, which is to say that my microphone had a bulky connection and I was too inept to notice, as well as too caught up in a great conversation. When I'm talking, the sound quality is not at the professional standard to which we aspire. Sorry about that. On the other hand, Richard Thompson sounds great, and he is the star of this show. So thank you, Richard Thompson, for your technical expertise, as well as your generosity, insights, sublime music, and all-around awesomeness. Please enjoy Richard Thompson on the Caropopcast.
I really enjoyed the book. It was fascinating for me to take this, deep dive into those early years, and I'm wondering, for your point of view, is this something difficult for you to do? Are you someone who naturally likes to look back, or is this something that was kind of like you had to sort of make yourself do it?
I think I've always selectively looked back. So there's things I enjoyed. I've always enjoyed looking back at, and things I probably shoved under the carpet somewhat. So in writing the book, I really had to look at everything, which was sometimes revealing, sometimes painful. And sometimes quite amusing. Remembering anecdotes was a lot of fun. I think the hardest thing was actually the chronology, but putting the chronology together, figuring out what happened when, because no one really seemed to have very good records about any of the Fairport stuff. All that 60s, 70s stuff really had to be stitched together from various sources. So that was the hardest part.
So did you sort of go back and listen to all this stuff with sort of fresh ears at the time? I mean, were there things that sort of surprised you when you sort of transported yourself back into this time period, either musically or just kind of like having new perspective on kind of the interpersonal stuff that was going on?
There were a few surprises. musically, there were equal joys and disappointments, I think, in listening to old stuff to put myself in the frame. Some records seem to stand up very well, and I'm grateful that we had a wonderful recording engineer, John Wood, just a great engineer, and a great studio back in those days. So stuff tends to sound fairly timeless. It's hard to tell when it was recorded. We didn't tend to lean towards fashionable sounds of the time. We didn't do too much flanging, phasing, triple tracking, that kind of stuff. Stuff is pretty much recorded in as true a way as possible. And that's held up very well over the years. And the same is true of like Nick Drake records, Sandy Denny records, people from the same musical stable. The stuff really holds up very well. And there's endless things I would want to change sonically, and of course in writing a book there's endless things that you want to change about your life, which is a lot harder to do. So you have to keep forgiving yourself for being an idiot from time to time.
So which were the songs and albums that held up surprisingly well for you, and which were the ones where you thought, oh, that wasn't quite how I remembered it?
Yeah, Unhalf Bricking, which we did in 1969, I thought really holds up very well as a record. And it's an 8-track record. It's got a couple of very long things on it. And of those 8 tracks, 3 tracks are kind of throwaways. We could have lost those very easily and made a fabulous 5-track EP that would have been just stupendous. So in spite of that, having that kind of extra baggage on the record, I think it's a really, really good record. And there are tracks on there that I think are actually important. I think there's a wonderful Bob Dylan cover on there called Percy's Song.
I love that.
Yeah, I think Bob himself said that was just one of his favourite covers of his own material. That's nice. And there's a song called A Sailor's Life, which was a kind of the first, true British folk rock record, in the sense that it was blending popular music forms with British traditional forms. That was the first real emphatic stab in that direction.
Something that on one hand seems kind of obvious and on the other hand was kind of revelatory to me was the idea that you were the first British band playing British music. Like you would think intuitively that would have happened before, but it really, like British rock and just that general overall umbrella really was American style music, and the idea of actually doing a British dance tune as a British rock band was unheard of at that point, right?
It was unheard of, yeah. The Beatles did some, fairly English sounding stuff, and the Kinks did as well. But they were more, but they were more influenced, I think, by British music hall tradition rather than actual, ancient tradition. Fairport really wanted to go all the way and to revive the traditional music of the British Isles, to bring it to a new audience, to bring it to a contemporary audience, to make it sound contemporary, so that it could be enjoyed by a whole new audience. In America, you had less of a split in that way. There was less of a gulf between a dying tradition and contemporary music. There's a kind of thread that goes from Appalachia to country music to rock and roll, through New Orleans to rock and roll. There are these kind of continuous threads. In Britain, traditional music was pretty much dead. You had to really track down the last singers who were still singing this stuff. So it was a kind of a point of crisis in many ways, and Fairport really felt we were on a mission.
It's interesting because you think about the sort of the biggest quote unquote legendary rock bands, and almost all of them are British. I mean, between the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin and the Who and Pink Floyd, and it's all this sort of stuff that's filtered through this other sensibility. But you don't have American bands that even have that kind of scope for some reason. So I don't know if there's some reason that like it sort of needed to go to Britain to sort of do that, but there's it's a different thing than what you guys were doing, which was really actually being rooted in the country where you lived.
Yeah, I think bands like the Beatles, the Stones, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin. There is a kind of a European filter, or a European sensibility that lays over the music that does make it a little bit different. So perhaps it did have to go to Europe and then go back to America to have that slightly different edge to it, and in some ways to be more accessible to a predominantly white audience, I suppose. Fairport, we're really trying to do something radically different, where we really wanted to change music, to change British music itself, and stop being slavish imitators. And it became more of a cult than a mainstream thing. I think perhaps to our regret, I think we thought we actually were going to change, the accents people sang with and that kind of thing. But that really didn't happen. And our influence was, to a small circle, really. Bands like Still I Span, the Albion Band, carried on that tradition, but it was never mainstream.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the link there would be Joe Boyd, and that you're playing at the UFO Club, and you have the Syd Barrett version of Pink Floyd, and Sid he sang with a British accent, and that was very different from what was that other sort of thing too. And he had this kind of Wind in the Willows thing going on, and then this sort of space thing, and Joe Boyd sort of links your two bands together.
Yeah. I love Sid. I love Sid's writing. He had a sense of whimsy, a very sort of British sense of whimsy. You say Wind in the Willows. I think that's very, very accurate. And there's a bit of kind of, there's a bit of Jeeves and Wooster in there, and a bit of Noel Coward or something in there. It's hard to exactly place the roots, but there's definitely a real British sensibility to him. And he almost sounds out of place, really, in a band that started out as a blues band. Pink Floyd were a straight ahead blues band that then became psychedelicized. But in terms of their harmonic sense, they were still very, pentatonic blues based band. But Sid definitely had this whole side to him that was unique and different. And I think when Sid dropped out, Roger Waters' vision of the band was much darker and stranger and a bit less original, I think. Right.
Yeah, and there's just something also about the sort of the intimacy of. I mean, you've had a career that's lasted for a long time on a really sort of steady level of quality and stuff, whereas these other bands kind of got like I'm sure when you're seeing, you're running into all these British musicians, it doesn't seem like it was an enormous music community at that time, because music was sort of newer and you just didn't have this explosion of bands. So so you're running into these musicians, and years later, you probably at that point couldn't envision, they're going to be playing stadiums in the 70s. And that's going to be how people experience their music. I'd rather experience your music the way I've experienced it over the years than to sort of have it become huge and then inaccessible. Mm-hmm. But it just sort of went into these different directions at that point.
It really did, yeah. The London music scene, sort of 67 onwards, was fairly intimate, and you did know all the bands, really. In many cases, you were with the same management, or you were with the same agency. So you would get booked over and over and over again with the same people. And for us, it was, the Floyd, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Blossom Toes, Family. That's about it. Just the same bands, T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I think everyone's ambition was basically to eat, to have 3 meals a day. It was it wasn't a particularly affluent lifestyle at that point. And I think our ambition as Fairport was to command a reasonable fee that we could break even. And in fact, when we did start breaking even, we were playing theatres, selling out theatres, and still not making that much money. So and then some other bands kicked on, as you say, get kicked onto the sort of stadium thing, which is a whole strange anomaly of 20th century music and 21st century music, which I don't pretend to understand.
I love the detail that I think it was the first Fairport gig you guys played Love 7 and 7 Is.
Yeah.
I remember discovering Love later and thinking, loving that band, but I love that there was sort of that kind of connection of you guys with that sort of the LA, pre-punk folk thing going on.
Yeah, proto-punk, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, well, Fairport, we were always big fans of lyrics. I think that was our main focus, really. We loved the songs of the great singer-songwriters of the time, people like Phil Oakes, Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, Richard Farina, and we would cover their songs as a young band before we started writing our own material. And we recognised in some of the LA bands like the Byrds and like Love, really good songwriting, really good lyric writing, and the Byrds, of course, had quite a lot of folk music connections, so we appreciated that as well. I think we saw more of an affinity with the LA bands than we did with the San Francisco bands that we thought were a bit excessive, a bit too drugged out.
Yeah, the approach that you were taking. I mean, this is sort of an obvious thing, I guess, but taking this sort of British approach to music, how did that influence the way you sort of learned and developed as a guitar player?
As a guitar player, I was always listening to a lot of different things. So I grew up with some of my father's jazz guitar records, particularly Les Paul and Django Reinhardt, which isn't a bad place to start, let's face it. And then my sister had the rock and roll records, so I'm listening to James Burton, I'm listening to Scotty Moore. So I'm really casting a wide net in terms of what I'm listening to, and then I started listening to classical music when I was a teenager and jazz when I was a teenager. So all this is kind of going into what would become a guitar style. And I think by the age of 18, 19, I was really trying not to sound like other guitar players in what I saw as a rather crowded London, scene. There was a lot of, you had Peter Green, you had Eric Clapton, Mick Taylor, Savoy Brown, all these, all these basically blues-based guitar players. So I said, well, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be something different. There's too much competition, and that really drove me to try to be a bit more original. And I became more influenced by the kind of country and western guitar players, and by jazz players, and by non-guitar, by keyboard players. Influenced me a great deal, and horn players, people like John Coltrane influenced me a great deal. I thought of the Coltrane thing with you on especially some of the sort of electric solos I heard even later in your career. When you went back and listened to those old, Fairport conventions, what did you think of yourself as a guitarist? Well, compared to where I am now, I think of myself as limited, as not having the range that I've got now. And, sometimes I think some of my musical obsessions may have been misplaced. But I think sometimes I could hit something and be really quite tasteful and quite original. But it didn't happen all the time. So I would be very critical of my younger self if I could speak to that young lad.
Of course, the thing that happens between On Half Broken and Legion Leaf is that the tragic car crash, which you go into in pretty vivid detail. It's real. I'd never, really sort of read about it. Certainly not like that. And I'm wondering if that's something you've kind of carried with you all these years, or whether it was something in the research of the book you sort of had to confront it, and all those details kind of came back like, oh, this is really what it was like.
It's not something that I would want to think about every day. To put it in the book, then I really had to remember pretty much as it happened. And I just tried to be as truthful as possible and tried to write down all the detail that I could remember. I think obviously it was a very traumatic thing for the band and for all of us. I think it affected our decision making for a couple of years after that. Yeah, I think in those days you didn't go to therapy. I mean, that didn't really exist in that way. It was more the post-war generation where you say, okay, well, yes, you've had a rough time, but just get over it. Just move on with life. Stiff upper lip and deal with it. So we never really processed it properly. We never really grieved properly. We never mourned properly. And I think certainly for the next couple of years, that was a deep trauma for everybody in the band. And on the 50th anniversary of the accident, the three original members of Fairport, we kind of phoned each other and commiserated with each other, because it still affects us. We still think back to that as a real traumatic turning point for all of us.
Right. Just put this in perspective for people listening. There was a van crash, May 12th, 1969. The band's van had crashed, and the drummer Martin Lampo was killed, along with Jeannie Franklin, whom you'd been dating at that time. And within 6 months, you'd come up with a new direction and recorded a new album. And like I'm talking about not sort of going through therapy, you guys were out of hospital and into the recording studio almost immediately.
Well, I think that was our therapy. I think we had to throw ourselves into work. And also to have a mission, to have a project. And the Legion Leaf album was really a savior in that way. It kept us busy, it kept us focused, and it kept us driven as well. Otherwise, I don't know what we would have done. I think it was just so important to us at that time to keep moving musically.
Right. And then after that, Sandy was fired from the band, and you talk about that in the book, and that was something I didn't realize. Do you sort of look back on that and think, oh, I'm not, that seemed clearer at the time than it does now? Or, I mean, obviously you all stayed in touch and friends and everything, but it seems like it's sort of a mysterious or sort of a little thing that kind of blew up into a big thing.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. Well, as I said, I think we weren't making very good decisions after the accident, and in retrospect, to fire Sandy, it was probably crazy. But we did get the feeling that she'd kind of already absented herself from the band and was probably planning a solo career or something. She didn't seem quite as dedicated to the band as the rest of us in that way. So perhaps she was already gone, and it wouldn't have made any difference.
How much did her singing sort of affect the way you wrote, and also her songwriting for that matter? Like, how much did you two sort of feed off each other in the artistic sense of writing the songs?
I can't speak for Sandy, but she certainly inspired me. And I could never emulate the way that she wrote. She was a very individualistic songwriter. She wrote a very interesting harmonic structure to her songs, and she wrote about, subject matter that was unique to her, I think. Sometimes it was hard to decipher her songs. Sometimes they were, fairly obvious and right there, but it was a different. It's a different song landscape than the one that I was really trying to create for myself. But I think. I think there's a very pleasant sense of rivalry with Sandy. Just the fact, you'd say, well, I've written 2 songs for the next album. How many have you written? And that kind of thing. So we kind of egg each other on a little bit in that way.
Well, also I'd imagine that writing a song that you're going to sing is different from writing a song that Sandy's going to sing, or later that Linda's going to sing. I mean, I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight is a very different album from Henry the Human Fly. And I wonder how much your writing, sort of was catering to like those voices, and maybe specifically, how they would, cater to Sandy and then to Linda.
Well, absolutely, yes. I think you're always very conscious when you are writing for other voices that you're writing something comprehensible to the singer. The singer has to be able to understand what you're saying in order to express the right emotion for the song, which Sandy and Linda were both great at. I mean, they're both really great interpreters of a song. But when I was writing Henry, I was thinking, well, I should just indulge myself. I should write these quirky, slightly surreal songs, and because I'm the one who's going to sing it, and I understand what I'm saying. I don't have to cater to someone else's musical style or abilities. I'll just write this weird stuff and see what happens. So yeah, that was a different mindset, writing a solo record.
So when you went to write I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, were you consciously like, okay, this is going to be a more straightforward album duet. I mean, not a duet, but but an album for these two voices, and it's going to just like have a different sort of approach.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I think also a song like Bright Lights, I'm really trying to reflect Linda's personality as well. So I'm kind of imagining her singing the song, and it's suiting her saying what she's saying, which I think is it's actually quite an inspiring thing when it's that specific. So one of the hardest things about writing a song is exactly what are you writing about. But if you've got someone else exactly in mind as the interpreter of the song, then that becomes much easier, and you really can be very, very specific.
So do you have in mind when you're writing, like, okay, I'm going to do When I Get to the Border, and she's going to do Withered and Died, and I'm going to do End of the Rainbow, and she's going to do I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, or Down Where the Drunkards Roll?
Yeah, absolutely. However, sometimes it switched. Sometimes, a Linda song became a Richard song, or vice versa. Sometimes I'd say, well, I can't sing this. You have to sing it. Sometimes you think, well, if you sing it in your key, then I can play a better guitar solo. I mean, just stuff like that. Stuff as basic as that would happen. So the basic idea was very specific tailoring to each voice and each personality. But then sometimes, the rules broke down and things shifted.
I did a little Googling, and I Googled you and Badfinger, and what I did find was that you were on a version of Come and Get It, credited to a band called The Magic Christians, but it was actually a Badfinger session you were on also. And that was probably when they're in their, maybe after they'd done All Things Must Pass, and they thought, oh, let's just get like all these people to play guitar at the same time, because they were pretty good. Pete Ham's a pretty good guitarist.
Yeah, absolutely. The Badfinger session I did, George Harrison was producing, but he didn't show up. I was disappointed that because I wanted to meet him. I never met him. And it just went on forever. So I just thought it's so wasteful. There seemed to be such a wasteful attitude, but by some people in those days, where you're just racking up huge expenses on studio time, but people who haven't written the song, or they're just sitting around, talking or smoking a bit of dope or something. It just seemed very inefficient and unstructured compared to 10 years earlier, when you expect to make an album in 3 hours. Suddenly it all got very, very sloppy and loose. But, I was getting paid anyway, so it's fine.
Now, so are you like just strumming an acoustic guitar in the background, or is there actually like a little Richard Thompson kind of guitar licks thing happening that if I listen to a Badfinger record, I'd be like, there he is?
No, I think I'm playing rhythm. I can't remember if it was one song or two songs that we did. But I was playing acoustic rhythm guitar, and there was another electric rhythm guitar player. And whatever lead there was overdubbed, I think.
Yeah, I think George was produced, at least in name, Day After Day. So I don't know, maybe you're on.
Yeah, that's a good song. Yeah, they did some great songs, Badfinger. Actually, some great records.
Records. Oh yeah. I have to say, I'm not the only one who's kind of intrigued by the idea that somehow you might have been a member of the Eagles. It seems like, and you talk about how you saw them playing Peaceful Easy Feeling and what a tight band that was. And I thought, if there's any song that you would never mistake for a Richard Thompson song, it's Peaceful Easy Feeling.
Yeah, it's it's a very California kind of song, isn't it, really? It's written by Jack Tempchin, I think I pronounced that correctly, who I think is a kind of California guy. It's sort of about being out in the California desert, really, and yeah, I probably couldn't relate to that very well. I don't think I would have been happy in the Eagles. I
would have liked hearing Glenn and Don sing harmonies on Withered and Died, though. That would have been fun, or End of the Rainbow.
Well, those guys are seriously great singers. I mean, they're fabulous harmony singers, just absolutely great. And hearing them in a rehearsal in kind of pre-Eagles days was pretty special. I mean, the harmonies were so good. It was so tight. And with what's his name, Randy as well on bass, Randy Meisner as well, who's a fabulous, like a really high harmony singer. They just sounded like $1 million.
And then the band approached you as well. Was that after Robbie Robertson was out?
Yeah, that was later. I was approached a couple of times by the band. I think once when Robbie left. And then later, maybe 10 years later, when it was all a bit sad as far as I was concerned. But I mean, again, I think I wanted to plough my own furrow, musically speaking. And I'm glad about decisions like that.
Is there any band that you would have joined if they'd offered you?
No, I don't think so.
They never. I could have seen Fleetwood Mac, pulling you in for one of their incarnations. They went through a lot of talented guitarists.
Yeah, amazing. Neil Finn did it. I mean, that was pretty amazing. And Mike Campbell, yeah. So that was pretty left field as far as I was concerned. But
yeah, me too.
Yeah. No, I don't think I want to play with Fleetwood Mac. Thank you very much.
So if Lindsay's out and they come to you and say, "Hey, we want you to replace Lindsey Buckingham," you would have been like, "No, thanks."
What would I say? I'd say, the number you just dialed? That's the fee.
I think it's when you were talking about Henry the Human Fly, you wrote, I knew the songs came out of me, but I didn't know why. Why these eccentric subjects? Was I just being a channel for music that hovers out there somewhere until it picks up the medium to bring it into the world? Did you ever answer that for yourself?
It's a thing I think about from time to time. I think particularly if you're in a live concert, especially an acoustic concert where you have a room full of people who are listening to you, and it seems to me that everybody in the room is important. It isn't just you performing at people. It's like this community thing happens, and you're the one who happens to be on the stage. But it's kind of an illusion. And you're the one the music flows through. You're the conduit for the music. But that also seems to be an illusion. It just seems to be this shared thing. And if you take one person out of the room, the music will change. There's something about the number of molecules in the room, that's very important. And it'll be interesting to do some shows. I've got some shows coming up next week where they're all socially distant shows indoors. And it'll be interesting to see if half a house is the same as a full house. It'll be a strange experience.
Well, you've done a lot of these online shows too, so you that's the other end of it where you've experienced that, and I imagine that feels quite different.
Yeah, that's very different. That's a bit more like being in a recording studio or something, where you're almost pretending there's an audience, or you're playing for yourself, if you like. All the streaming things that I've done in the last year, I mean, it's a wonderful connection to the audience. It's great to have that thing there. And people appreciate it because you can look at the comments as they're scrolling down and people say, "Oh, I love that song, fantastic." But it's still a little removed from the reality of performing, and you've got somebody 3 feet in front of you, and you just feel that real surge of communication. It's harder to feel that communicative spirit when you're at other ends of the digital world.
Did this experience kind of change your songwriting at all? I mean, did a different kind of song come out while you're sort of this weird, isolated, connecting via technology sort of stretch?
I was looking for that, but it didn't really happen. I was thinking, gosh, I'll probably be writing this whole different, type of song. I'd be writing a lot of prison songs or something. But I looked at the subject matter of my songs, and it's just all over the place. I mean, there's no real sense of this is a time being reflected here. I'm just writing from imagination rather than reflecting my current reality. I'm writing more from memory, I suppose, really. In
general, do you feel like the way you write songs has been consistent throughout, or has it changed from year to year, decade to decade?
Well, I think you have to imagine that you're evolving and that you are improving, and certainly that you're changing. I think I tend to think that every recording project, at least, is a different statement. It's a different kind of thing. So you might think, of a clear theme for an album, or the theme might be rather looser than that. It might be just you see some commonality to the tunes you've written in the last year or so, and you think, well, that's a kind of a structure right there. There's a kind of a reflection of something there. But I think you have to keep exploring and keep experimenting, and certainly, as a songwriter, I think you have to play with different forms sometimes. You can't just keep writing, to the same three chords. You can't just keep writing the same country song over and over again. I think sometimes you just have to get out of that and look for something different. And you may well fail, but it's worth failing occasionally to come up with something that's new and refreshing.
Well, every once in a while, someone on Twitter will write something like, "Who's had the longest sustained career in rock and roll?" or something like that. And I tend to chime in Richard Thompson, because I feel like, there's so many artists, bands, whatever, that sort of have their peak, and then they have like the last 20 years that you really haven't had to pay attention to. And with you, there's just been this consistency. I mean, 13 Rivers is a terrific album.
Oh, thank you.
And I saw you and the band play that at Talia Hall here as well. And songs of some of your most beloved songs, were from the 90s, like 1952, Against Black Lightning, and the song that gave this book its title, Beeswing. And you're into you started in the 60s and you're in the 90s by the time those come around. So you're constantly finding new songs that sound like they've been around all the time. And I doubt you can articulate how you do it, but how do you do it?
Oh, tough question. I think you just have to keep beginning again. You have to be an eternal student, first of all, of music. You can never assume, I've sold X number of records, so therefore I must be great, therefore I can start to relax. You have to really keep reinventing it yourself. If not on a daily basis, then on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. You have to say, okay, I'm going to start again. Who am I? Why am I doing this? You have to keep asking yourself questions. And I think you have to raise your standards as well. I think you have to be dissatisfied with yourself, with things that don't come up to your expectation. I think you really have to keep going deeper, if you like, into yourself to find the common areas with other human beings. Because you're really, as a songwriter, you want to speak the truth, and to find the truth, you have to find it within yourself. And sometimes you have to look a long way in to find it.
You talk in the book about how, like Sandy Denny, Nick Drake, John Martin, when some of these people, they have some commercial disappointments, they begin to doubt themselves, and then they start making changes that aren't good for their music. Somehow, is it a matter of confidence, or what is it? Like, how did you avoid falling into that trap that those guys fell into?
I don't think I did avoid it. I think I did fall into that a couple of times, where I thought, we have to try to reach a more commercial, audience. What do we do? And the usual answer is that you get a different producer in, or you get a different manager or something. You tend to do it from the outside. And I think I've never thought that I've written uncommercial songs. And sometimes I've had successful covers by other people, so singing my songs, I've had hits by other people. So I never saw a need to change that aspect of it, really. But sometimes you think, well, if we got, Paul McCartney in to produce the record, that's going to make a difference, then we'll have a hit. But it rarely does. It rarely works, in my experience. I think it has worked historically for some people. But it depends on how much of a whore you want to be in some cases. I can think of examples of people who've really just sold themselves down the river, as far as I'm concerned. Morally, to make the most commercial record they can possibly make, and yes, it has changed their career. Yes, they made loads of money. But do I respect them? Nah, not really.
You have to name names now.
No names.
Do you feel more involved in like sort of the production of your albums now than you did earlier, or have you always sort of had the same kind of engagement in that aspect of it?
I've always felt that I pretty much had control, certainly for the last 30 odd years. That's quite a long time. So if I bring in a producer from time to time, it's really just to try something different, to see if it comes out differently. To see what other people will bring to it, because you can get tired of your own ideas sometimes. Do I think I'm the best producer of my own music? I probably do, but it's just fun to change it up sometimes. So I tend to go backwards and forwards. I tend to think, well, let's get someone in for this record. Next record I'll do it myself. It's just a nice occasional thing.
And there tends to be a consistency also in the musicians that you work with. I remember seeing you played at the Double Door in Chicago, and it was right before Mock Tutor came out. And I think you came out and played the first 5 songs. And I think it was the first time I saw Michael Jerome as your drummer. And I just remember, being knocked out by those songs, and also just the performance and the band, I felt like was really sort of pushing you forward, as opposed to some of the bands. I mean, we've always had really great bands, but sometimes it's a little more sort of holding back on the beat, and sometimes it's sort of propelling you. And this outfit seemed like it was propelling you, and I'm wondering how much of a difference that makes from your point of view.
Well, it means I can relax because I know I've got incredible rhythm section behind me, so I don't have to think, are these guys dragging, are these guys speeding up, because they never do. They're just absolutely on the money all the time. And everything that Michael Jerome plays swings. I mean, he just has built-in swing, and if I could afford to, I'd be happy to sit in the front row during a show, to just jump off stage, sit in the front row, and just watch Michael play the drums, because he's such a wonderful, wonderful musician, and he knows all that sort of Irish and Scottish stuff as well. I mean, he's kind of schooled in all these different disciplines, and he studied Indian music and all these different things, so he can adapt to me really easily. And Taras is a wonderful bass player. I mean, it's just it's a treat to go out on the road with the band. I just love to do it. It's fun to play solo. It's great to play with the band as well.
And you've enjoyed the trio format as opposed to the more filled out version that you were doing years earlier.
Well, I think I do. Although these days the trio is getting larger, it's still nominally a trio, but I think now it's a 4 or 5 piece trio, because my guitar tech will play rhythm guitar on a couple of songs. My partner Zara will sing on a few things. So it's this very large, overloaded trio.
I tend to also think about when I think of guitar. Your great guitar players. I think often people think of them as, well, this one's a great electric guitar player. This one's really great on acoustic stuff. But you seem, equally sort of talented and comfortable in either one. Do you sort of favor one or the other, or do you practice both equally? Like, is there, because they're obviously different skills. One's playing, unaccompanied, and one is sort of fitting into a band with this electric kind of feel to it.
I tend to treat them as very different instruments. When I'm playing acoustic, I'm really accompanying the voice most of the time, and it's a whole different skill set, really. So I have to hold down the rhythm. If I'm going to play other stuff, I have to add harmony to that. If I'm playing a solo, I have to have a solo to that. Whereas, as you say, with electric, other people can take up some of the rhythm and harmonic roles, and I can be a little freer and looser to improvise and to play around with the music. I probably play more acoustic than electric, just because. But because it takes more muscle to play acoustic. If I just played electric and then suddenly had to play acoustic, I might find myself getting blisters or something. But because it's a little harder, So it's better to have that as your main practice diet, and then electric becomes extremely easy after playing acoustic.
Well, again, having seen you relatively recently, I've never gotten any sense that you've lost any sort of step. Does any of this get harder as you get older, or are you just able to just keep doing this the same?
I think you have to thank your lucky stars, really, if you can still be playing at 70 plus. I mean, I do what I can to keep fit. I go to the gym. I stretch. But there are many things that you need to keep in working order. You've got to keep your ears working. You've got to keep your fingers working. So it's it's lucky. It's fortunate if you can keep playing. Some of my contemporaries are more arthritic than I am. Some people have other health issues. Some people have hearing issues. So I'm grateful for what I can do, and I love doing it. So I hope I can do it for as long as I can.
And your voice still sounds as good, if not better than ever as well, which is another thing. I mean, you never know with that either.
Well, I've never kind of, tried to be Tina Turner or anything. I've never kind of, tried to scream my way through music, and that's probably just as well. I mean, again, I try to look after my voice, try to do my scales, my exercises, try not to kill it. It's good to, shout a bit sometimes, get a bit gritty sometimes, but there's always another gig the next day. So I just, again, I'm grateful for whatever I've got, whatever range I've got.
Lastly, I just want to talk about so Scott Timberg, former LA Times reporter as well as author, worked on this with you. Mm-hmm. I just to get this out front, you were in the probably pretty far along in the book, and he took his own life at the end of 2019, mm-hmm. in December. But so just tell me about sort of the process of how this worked, and was he sort of interviewing you and, writing up what you said? Were you sort of writing stuff? Like, how did it all happen?
The book wouldn't have happened without Scott. He was my neighbor in LA, and he said, "Oh, you must do a book about the 60s, it'd be so great." And I said, "Well, I can't be bothered, not interested." And he kind of harangued me for a couple of years, and so I said, "Well, okay, I'll do it." And he said, "Well, let me interview you. We'll do it as an interview process." And we tried that for a while, and I thought whatever my voice as a human being was being lost in the process. So I said, well, let me just write it. I'll write it. You come in more towards the end, in a more of an editorial capacity, and we'll see how that works. But sadly, Scott took his life before we could get to that point. So it was a pretty devastating turning point in the book.
Yeah, no, I read about it, and I was like, my heart stopped. I was so, and he was a cultural reporter at the LA Times.
That's right. Yeah.
Sort of thing I was doing at the Chicago Tribune as well. But so the book as it is really is what you wrote, as opposed to him sort of crafting interviews and then you kind of smoothing it out or something like that.
No, I actually sat down and wrote the whole thing, and that really did seem to be the best process. Were
there areas where when you were writing you just thought, I just don't want to get into this, I don't want to go there?
No. Sometimes I was writing pretending it was happening to somebody else, and the hardest thing was actually to read the audiobook. That was much tougher than writing. That was hard.
Well, I mean, it's a very candid, portrayal of you as a young man, and just sort of you in the context of the drugs that were going around, without it being sort of a sex, drug, and rock and roll type story. But there's all of that is in there. You also, I have to tell you, I'm just going to read this just because it made me laugh out loud. This is when you're at the National Jazz and Blues Festival in 1970. Dave Swarbrick is looking for a place to go to the loo. He wrote, all the portable toilets had blown down, so there was nowhere backstage, but he noticed a hole in the plastic sheeting at the side of the stage and stuck his Hampton through there and let rip. Unfortunately, that was the press enclosure. If we were expected a great review, we weren't going to get one now.
It's all true.
For the word Hampton, I admire that passage.
Yeah, it's Cockney rhyming slang. Hampton Wick for the male member Hampton Wick for the PR*CK.
Have you gotten much feedback from people who who were in the band who were around and read it?
Some, yeah. I think mostly people liked it and enjoyed it. I was concerned that my memory would diverge from other people's memories, and I think it clearly does in some places. We all remember things happening differently, which is kind of weird. But on the whole, my contemporaries have been supportive, yes, so far. Any
feedback from Linda on it?
She read it. What did she say? I think she liked it. There's probably a bit too much. I was supposed to meet her the other day, and it didn't happen, so I would have got a fuller picture. But she didn't say anything too terrifying. She's not going to sue me, I don't think. Anyway, I think I painted her in a fairly good light, actually.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. There actually could have been more on just, it's not like a deep dive into your marriage or anything like that. I mean, you talk about it mostly in the musical terms, and you're making those albums.
Yeah.
I saw an interview actually in the San Diego Union Tribune where he said, you really didn't want to write about 1976 and 1981. Linda and I made 3 bad albums that I did not want to write about. And I was trying to think, what were the 3? I know that I would assume you're counting First Light and Sunny Vista, but I don't know what the third one is.
Well, probably the Jerry Rafferty attempt at an album that didn't really come out, I would say was the third album. I think Shoot Out the Lights is a better record, where we're getting a bit more on our feet again after the after the 70s, where we're finally getting back in the saddle.
Yeah, no, Shoot Out the Lights, because the Jerry Rafferty thing is like those songs in just a much less good sort of context or setting, and you. I think the last time I interviewed you was when that was being re-released, and we were talking about some of sort of the sonic. There was some sonic mishap with Shoot Out the Lights, but it's still a fantastic record. But there's something where like the high end is missing or something.
The room mics are missing on the drums. On the drums, to get a bigger drum sound, you place a couple of room mics in stereo a little further away from the drums, and that gives the drums some size. And those got accidentally wiped from the Shoot Out the Lights session, so you have to kind of replace that with some kind of reverb usually, which we did. It sounds fine. It sounds okay.
I'm sure everyone's asking if there's going to be a volume 2.
Volume 2, maybe. I'd have to pick it up in 81, I suppose, and roll from there. But the thing about the 60s into the 70s was that it was very intense, and a lot happened in a very dense period of time. And I think to write a volume 2. To write another 250 pages might be a couple of decades worth of material. When you do things for the first time, it really leaves an impression on you. When you play Schenectady for the 20th time, it leaves less of an impression, and. It's only if someone dies in the audience or there's a sort of a double murder backstage that you have something juicy to write about. Things get more repetitious, so you have to pick and choose much more.
Is there any like sort of standout story from the later years where you think, well, if I did a second book, at least I'd get this in there?
Oh, there's some great stories. I mean, some seriously great stories. Touring America with a photocopy of an American Express card. Like we didn't have any money, but we had a photocopy of the Hannibal Records American Express card, and somehow we got around America with that. But it took hours and hours and hours at every Hertz counter, at every airline to actually to make them believe that this was real. Anyway,
they couldn't give you the actual plastic.
No, they couldn't, or they didn't, or something. None of us had credit cards at that point. I mean, it was just checks and cash, really, basically.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you talking to me about this. I love the book, and I've loved your music for a long, long time, and I look forward to hearing what the next thing is for you. Have you recorded more? During is there a next album or EP coming up?
Yeah. Well, I just put out 2 EPs in the last year, and the next band record is written. It's just a matter of when we can get into the studio, which probably perhaps the end of this year we can get in and record. And it's been a good time for writing. Not so good for anything else, but it's been great for having the time and space to write, and so that's been a bonus.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard Thompson. It's fantastic talking to you. I hope to see you back in Chicago area soon, or I'll just have to travel and do that, or maybe go to your songwriting camp or something.
Oh, yes, you'd be very welcome. Yes.
Are you doing that this summer? See, this is the
It's happening. It's happening. It's called Frets and Refrains, and it's just outside Woodstock, New York, up in the Catskill Mountains. Songwriting and guitar playing camp. We have some wonderful guest teachers this year. We've got Tiff Merritt this year, John Doyle teaching guitar, and just about all of my family as well. All my sons and grandsons seem to be participating. So it's a great camp, and I think we're finally able to put it on with full COVID awareness. So it's going to be great.
My good friend Steve Dawson, with whom I actually wrote a book about songwriting, went to it a few years ago, and when Patty Griffin was there, and he was so inspired by just the whole time out there. And he has a new album that just came out that's fantastic, and talks about how influenced those songs were by going to your camp.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. We get professional musicians coming as students. So there you go.
Do you feed off of that also as a songwriter? Do you get ideas just from, all these people kind of being in that sort of creative environment?
Well, I love the creativity of the environment. It's fantastic. And sometimes you can be teaching a class and you say to the class, well, here's your homework, and I want you to go away and write this kind of song. And then you think, maybe I'll go away and write that kind of song, because I've got some ideas about that. So it is creative. It's wonderful to hear, especially like young people. We have people as young as like 16, 17, 18 years old, and hear them write some really great song or do some incredible performance. Sometimes the people that young are just great singers and great performers. So it's all very inspiring, absolutely inspiring.
Awesome. All right. Well, I would love to do that sometime, and love to hear you the next time, I can hear you play again, because you've been one of my favorites for a very long time, and it's an honor to get to talk to you. I really appreciate the time, and we'll see and hear you soon, Richard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
That wraps up the first episode of the Caro Popcast. Thanks so much to Richard Thompson, whose memoir Beeswing is available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook from Algonquin Books. Richard Thompson is back on the road with dates on the East Coast, in the Midwest, and the UK. He'll be playing solo shows at Chicago's Old Town School of Folk Music on November 16th and 17th. His website is richardthompson-music.com. Check it out. The next Caropop guest will be spectacular bassist Bruce Thomas, who laid down such melodic, groovy, and propulsive parts as a member of Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Bruce and Elvis had a major falling out years ago, but is a reconciliation in the works? You'll hear about all that, as well as the making of such indelible albums as this year's model, Get Happy, and Imperial Bedroom. And you'll learn which mega group invited Bruce Thomas to become a member years before the Attractions came together. No, it wasn't the Eagles. Shout out to Space in Evanston, which hosted my Talking in Space series and has a terrific slate of outdoor and indoor shows. And Hoosier Mama Pie Company, which provides support and sustenance. Thanks to Lou Carlozo, the producer engineer extraordinaire behind the Caropop theme and other technical tidbits. For production, engineering, and arranging work, check out Karma Productions, that's Karma with a C, worldwide, and email Lou at lou@quoted.com, LOU@QWOTED.com. Thank you to Marty Rosenbaum, web developer and super duper guy and artiste. This Caro Popcast was produced by Chris Swake, the most valuable player on any team. Thank you, Chris. And I'm Mark Caro. Please follow me on Twitter @Mark Caro, which is @MarkCaro, And visit our website, caropop.com, for lively arts and cultural conversation and more about the Caropopcast. Finally, thanks to all of you for being part of this. As the Rolling Stones sang on The Ed Sullivan Show, let's spend some time together. Bye for now.